get back, gonna get gonna get free. Gonna get back, gonna get free.
Dressed up in white, now how can he smile with a face of all eyes? He wanders the night through sneers and words snide, spinning round and round his precious mind like dizzy neon lights. Can anybody find out any other way? It's choking up his throat now and dripping out his mouth like liquid fighting dying sparks, like burning butterflies. These creatures are vampires. They're killing by the night. They're falling from the dead trees to silhouette your life. He sees his white face, brains limp, grey and cold. Trees grow in their throats, and crystals in nose. His cellophane mask has filled up with smoke. Look through the holes in his eyes and see his red soul. Can anybody find out any other way? It's choking up his throat now and dripping out his mouth. These creatures are vampires, they're killing by the night. They're hanging from the dead trees like burning butterflies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to my stream. I am Theo, and I like to read literature, communist literature. I also like to play games and try and do new things and have fun. And this is a way for me to sort of open up and be less awkward and learn how to talk a little bit better. Sort of let my personality out. I can be pretty funny, pretty silly, but mostly I'm chill. I'm very, very chill. So, what we have been doing is reading Michael Parenti's Blackshirts and Reds. It's a book on the politics of how during and post World War II, how the Axis or the Allies pretty much decided to be against communism. And basically, what communism is something to be discussed probably in depth at a later date. Right now, we're talking more about what's and why people are against communism and the threat that capitalism has on communism. So, watch my previous VODs for the first 3 chapters. We're starting at chapter 4. And if not, you can just go ahead and read his book. It's free on, you can look it up online and catch up to then. Let's transfer right. Okay. So, I'm starting to hear reverb. Okay. Turn the music down a little bit. So it's just barely there. Okay. So, chapter 4 is Communism in Wonderland. the various communist countries suffered from major systemic deficiencies. While these internal problems were seriously exacerbated by the destruction and military threat imposed by the Western capitalist powers, there were a number of difficulties that seemed to inhere in the system itself. So, rewarding inefficiency. Now, this chapter specifically is talking about the problems that communist countries have made. So, this is mostly talking about the USSR. Um, so, we'll get in depth with that. So, rewarding inefficiency. All communist nations were burdened by rigid economic command systems. While framed in the past tense, the following discussion also applies to a few remaining communist countries still in existence. Central planning was useful and even necessary in the earlier period of siege socialism to produce steel, wheat, tanks in order to build an industrial base and withstand the Nazi onslaught. But it eventually hindered technological development and growth and proved incapable of supplying a wide enough range of consumer goods and services. No computerized system could be advised to accurately model a vast and intricate economy. No system could gather and process the immense range of detailed information needed to make correct decisions about millions of production tasks. Top-down planning stifled initiative throughout the system. Stagnation was evident in the failure of the Soviet industrial establishment to apply the innovations of the scientific technological revolution of the 70s and 80s, including the use of computer technology. Though the Soviets produced many of the world's best mathematicians, physicists, and other scientists, little of their work found actual application. As Mikhail Gorbachev complained before the 20th Communist Party Congress in 1990, we can no longer tolerate the managerial system that rejects scientific and technological progress and new technologies, that is committed to cost ineffectiveness and generates squandering and waste. It is not enough to denounce ineptitude. One must also try to explain why it persisted despite repeated exhortations from leaders, going as far back as Stalin himself, who seethed about time-serving bureaucrats. An explanation for the failure of the managerial system may be found in the system itself, which created disincentives for innovation. Managers were little inclined to pursue technological paths that might lead to their own obsolescence. Many of them were not competent in the new technologies and should have been replaced. Number 2. Managers received no rewards for taking risks. They maintained their positions regardless of whether innovative technology was developed, as was true of their superiors and central planners. Number 3. Supplies needed for technological change were not readily available. Since inputs were fixed by the plan and all materials and labor were fully committed, it was difficult to divert resources to innovative production. In addition, experimentation increased the risk of failing to meet one's quotas. There was no incentive to produce better machines for other enterprises since that brought no rewards to one's own firm. Quite the contrary, under the pressure to get quantitative results, managers often cut corners on quality. There was a scarcity of replacement parts both for industrial production and for durable use consumer goods. Because top planners set such artificially low prices for spare parts, it was seldom cost efficient for factories to produce them. Because producers did not pay real value prices for raw materials, fuel, and other things, enterprises often used them inefficiently. Number 7. Productive capacity was underutilized. Problems of distribution led to excessive unused inventory. Because of irregular shipments, there was a tendency to hoard more than could be put into production, further adding to shortages. Improvements in production would lead only to an increase in one's production quota. In effect, well run factories were punished with greater workloads. Poor performing ones were rewarded with lower quotas and state subsidies. Managerial irresponsibility was a problem in agriculture as well as industry. One Vietnamese farm organizer's comment would describe the situation in most other communist countries. The painful lesson of farm cooperation was that management was not motivated to succeed or produce. If anything, farm management was often motivated to provide poor product. For instance, since state buyers of meat paid attention to quantity rather than quality, collective farmers maximized profits by producing fatter animals. Consumers might not care to eat fatty meat, but that was their problem. Only a foolish or saintly farmer would work harder to produce better quality meat for the privilege of getting paid less. As in all countries, bureaucracy tended to become a self feeding animal. Administrative personnel increased at a faster rate than productive workers. A factory of 11,000 production workers might have an administrative staff of 5,000, a considerable burden on productivity. In some enterprises, administrative personnel made up half the full number of workers. The heavily bureaucratic code of operation did not allow for critical, self corrective feedback. In general, there was a paucity of the kind of debate that might have held planners and managers accountable to the public. The state of the whistleblower was the same in communist countries as in our own. Those who exposed waste, incompetence, and corruption were more likely to run risks than receive rewards. Nobody minding the store. We have been taught that people living under communism suffer from the totalitarian control over every aspect of life, as Time magazine still tells us. Talking to people themselves, one found that they complain less about overbearing control than about the absence of responsible control. Maintenance people fail to perform needed repairs. Occupants of a new housing project might refuse to pay rent, and no one bothered to collect it. With lax management in harvesting, storage, and transportation, as much as 30% of all produce was lost between field and store, and thousands of tons of meat were left to spoil. People complained about broken toilets, leaky roofs, rude salespeople, poor quality goods, late trains, deficient hospital services, and corrupt and unresponsive bureaucrats. Corruption and favoritism were commonplace. There was the manager who regularly pilfered the till, the workers who filched foodstuffs and goods from state stores or supplies from factories in order to service private homes for personal gain, the peasants on collective farms who stripped parts from tractors to sell them on the black market, the director who accepted bribes to place people at the top of a waiting list to buy cars, and the farmers who hoarded livestock, which they sold to townspeople at 3 times the government's low procurement price. All this was hardly the behavior of people trembling under totalitarian rule of terror. The system itself rewarded evasion and noncompliance. Thus, the poorer the performance of the collective farm, the more substantial the subsidy and the less demand in the way of work quotas. The poorer the performance of plumbers and mechanics, the less burdened they were with calls and quotas. The poorer the restaurant service, the fewer the number of clients, and the more food left over to take home for oneself or sell to the black market. The last thing restaurant personnel wanted was satisfied customers who would return to dine at the officially fixed low prices. Not surprisingly, work discipline left much to be desired. There was a clerk who chatted endlessly with a friend on the telephone while a long line of people waited resentfully for service. The 2 workers who took 3 days to paint a hotel wall that should have taken a few hours. the many who would walk off their jobs to go shopping. Such poor performance itself contributed to low productivity in the cycle of scarcity. In 1979, Cuban leader Raul Castro offered this list of abuses: the lack of work discipline, unjustified absences from work, deliberate go slows so as to not surpass the norms, which are already low and poorly applied in practice, so that they won't be changed. In contrast to capitalism, when people in the country work an exhausting 12-hour workday and more, there are many instances today, especially in agriculture, of people working no more than 4 or 6 hours, with the exception of cane cutters and possibly a few other kinds of work. We know that in many cases, heads of brigades and foremen made a deal with workers to meet the norm in half a day and then go off and work for the other half for some nearby small private farmer for extra income, or to go slow and meet the norm in 7 or 8 hours, or to do 2 or 3 norms in a day and report them over other days on which they don't go to work. All these tricks of the trade in agriculture also to be found in industry, transportation services, repair shops, and many other places where there's rampant buddyism. Cases of you do me a favor and I'll do you one, and pilfering on the side. If fired, an individual had a constitutional guarantee to another job and seldom had any difficulty finding one. The labor market was a seller's market. Workers did not fear losing their jobs, but managers feared losing their best workers, and sometimes overpaid them to prevent them from leaving. Too often, however, neither monetary rewards nor employment itself were linked to performance. The dedicated employee usually earned no more than the irresponsible one. The slackers and pilferers had a demoralizing effect on those who wanted to work in earnest. Full employment was achieved by padding the workforce with people who had relatively little to do. This added to labor scarcity, low productivity, lack of work discipline, and the failure to implement labor-saving technologies that would maximize production. The communists operated on the assumption that once capitalism and its attendant economic abuses were eliminated, and once social production was communalized, and people were afforded some decent measure of security and prosperity, they would contentedly do their fair share of work. That often proved not so. Communist economies had a kind of wonderland quality in that prices seldom bore any relation to actual cost or value. Many expensive services were provided almost entirely free, such as education, medical care, and most recreational, sporting, and cultural events. Housing, transportation, utilities, and basic foods were heavily subsidized. Many people had money but not much to buy with it. High-priced quality goods and luxury items were hard to come by. All this in turn affected work performance. Why work hard to earn more when there was not that much to buy? Wage increases designed to attract workers to disagreeable or low prestige jobs, or as incentive to production, only added to the disparity between purchasing power and the supply of goods. Prices were held artificially low, first out of dedication to egalitarian principles, but also because attempts to readjust them provoked worker protests in Poland, East Germany, and the USSR. Thus, in the Soviet Union and Poland, the state refused to raise the price of bread, which was priced at only a few pennies per loaf, although it cost less than an animal feed. One result, farmers in both countries bought the bread to feed the pigs. With rigorous price controls, there was hidden inflation, a large black market, and long shopping lines. Citizens were expected to play by the rules and not take advantage of the system, even when the system inadvertently invited transgressions. They were expected to discard a self-interested mode of behavior when in fact there was no reward and some disadvantage in doing so. The brutal totalitarian regime was actually a giant trough from which many took whatever they could. There was strong resentment concerning consumer scarcities. The endless shopping lines, the 10-year wait for a new automobile, the housing shortage that compelled single people to live at home or get married in order to qualify for an apartment of their own, and the 5-year wait for that apartment. The crowding and financial dependency on parents often lead to early divorce. These and other such problems took their toll on people's commitment to socialism. Wanting it all. I listened to an East German friend complain of poor services and inferior products. The system did not work, he concluded. But what of the numerous social benefits still lacking in much of the world? I asked. Aren't those to be valued? His response was revealing. Oh, nobody ever talks about that. People took for granted what they had in the way of human services and entitlements while hungering for consumer goods dangling in their imaginations. The human capacity for discontent would not be underestimated. People cannot live on social wage alone. Once our needs are satisfied, then our wants tend to escalate, and our wants becomes our needs. A rise in living standards often incites a still greater rise in expectations. As people are treated better, they want more of the good things and not necessarily grateful for what they already have. Leading professionals who attain relatively good living standards wanted to dress better, travel abroad, and enjoy the more abundant lifestyles available to people of means in the capitalist world. It was this desire for greater affluence rather than the quest for political freedom that motivated most of those who immigrated to the West. Material wants were mentioned far more often than the lack of democracy. The immigrants who fled Vietnam in 1989 were not persecuted political dissidents. Usually they were relatively prosperous craftsmen, small entrepreneurs, well-educated engineers, architects, and intellectuals seeking greater opportunities. To quote one, I don't think my life here in Vietnam is very bad. In fact, I'm very well off. But that's human nature to always want something better. Another testified, we had 2 shops and our income was decent, but we wanted a better life. And another, they left for the same reasons we did. They just wanted to be richer, just like us. Today, a get-rich mania is spreading throughout much of Vietnam as that nation lurches toward a market economy. Likewise, the big demand in the German Democratic Republic was for travel, new appliances, and bigger apartments. The New York Times described East Germany as a country of 16 million who seems transfixed by one issue. How soon can they become prosperous as West Germany? A national poll taken in China reported that 68% chose their goal to live well and get rich. In 1989, I asked the GR ambassador in Washington, D.C., why his country made such junky 2-cylinder cars. He said the goal was to develop good public transportation and discourage the use of costly private vehicles. But when asked to choose between a national, efficient, economically sound, and economically sane mass transportation system or an automobile with its instant mobility, special status, privacy, and personal empowerment, the East Germans went for the latter, as do most people in the world. The ambassador added ruefully, we thought building a good society would make good people. That's not always true. Whether or not it was a good society, at least he belatedly recognized the discrepancy between public ideology and private desire. In Cuba today, many youth see no value in joining the Communist Party, and I think Fidel Castro had his day and should step aside. Again, this is an older book. The revolutionary accomplishments in education and medical care are something that they take for granted and cannot get excited about. Generally, they are more concerned about their own personal future than about socialism. University courses on Marxism and courses on the Cuban Revolution, once over-enrolled, now go sparsely attended, while students crowd into classes on global markets and property law. With the U.S. blockade and the loss of Soviet aid, the promise of abundance receded beyond sight in Cuba, and the cornucopia of the North appeared ever more alluring. Many Cuban youth idealize life in the United States and long for its latest styles in music. Like the Eastern Europeans, they think capitalism will deliver the goodies at no special cost. When told the young people in the United States face serious hurdles, they responded with all the certainty of inexperience. We know that many people in the States are poor and that many are rich. If you work hard, however, you can do well. It is the land of opportunity. By the second or third generation, relatively few were still alive who can favorably contrast their lives under socialism with the great hardships and injustices of pre revolutionary days. As stated by one Cuban youth who has no memory of life before the revolution, we're tired of slogans. That was all right for our parents, but the revolution is history. In a society of rapidly rising and sometimes unrealistic expectations, those who did not go do well, who would not find employment commensurate with their training, or who were stuck with drudge work, were especially inclined to want to change. Even the best of societies, much labor has an industrial value but no inherent gratification. The sooner a tedious task was completed, the sooner there was another to be done. So why knock yourself out? If building the revolution and winning the battle of production means performing essential but routine tasks for the rest of one's foreseeable future, the revolution understandably loses its luster. There's often not enough interesting and creative work for all to go around for all who consider themselves interesting and creative people. In time, the revolution suffers from the routinization of charisma. The routinization of charisma. That's an interesting phrase. Ordinary people cannot sustain in everyday life a level of intense dedication for abstract, albeit beautiful ideals. Why struggle for a better life if it cannot now be attained? And if it can be enjoyed now, then forget about revolutionary sacrifice. Reactionism to the surface. For years, I heard about the devilishly clever manipulations of communist propaganda. Later on, I was surprised to discover that news media in communist countries were usually lackluster and plodding. Western capitalist nations are immersed in an advertising culture, with billions spent on marketing and manipulating images. The communist countries had nothing comparable. Their media coverage generally consisted of dull protocol visits and official pronouncements, along with glowing reports about the economy and society. So glowing that people complained about not knowing what was going on in their own country. They could read about abuses of power, industrial accidents, worker protests, and earthquakes occurring in every country but their own. And even when the press exposed domestic abuses, they usually went uncorrected. Media reports sometimes so conflicted with daily experience that the official press was not believed when it did tell the truth, as when it reported on poverty and repression in the capitalist world. If anything, many intellectuals in communist nations were utterly starry-eyed about the capitalist world and unwilling to look at its seamier side. Ferociously opposed to the socialist system, they were anti-communist to the point of being full-fledged adulterers of Western reactionism. The more rabidly reactionary chic a position was, the more appeal it had for the intelligentsia. With almost religious fervor, intellectuals maintained that the capitalist West, especially the United States, was a free market paradise of superabundance and almost limitless opportunity. Nor would they believe anything to the contrary. With complete servitude, well-fed, university-educated, Moscow intellectuals sitting in their modest but comfortable apartments would tell U.S. visitors, "The poorest among you live better than we." A conservative deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal, David Brooks, offers his profile of the Moscow intellectual. He is the master of content, and he feels he is living in a world run by imbeciles. He is not unsure, casting about for the correct answers. The immediate answers are obvious: democracy and capitalism. His self-imposed task is to smash the idiots who stand in the way. He has none of the rococo mannerisms of our intellectuals, but values bluntness, rudeness, and arrogance. These democratic intellectuals love Ronald Reagan, Marlboros in the South, and the American Civil War. Consider Andrei Sakharov, the darling of the U.S. press, who regularly praised corporate capitalism while belittling the advances achieved by the Soviet people. He lambasted the U.S. peace movements for its opposition to the Vietnam War and accused the Soviets of being military expansionists and the sole culprits behind the arms race. Sakharov supported every U.S. armed intervention abroad and as a defense of democracy, and characterized new U.S. weapon systems like a neutron bomb as primarily defensive. Anointed by the U.S. leaders and media as a human rights advocate, he never had an unkind word for the human rights violations perpetrated by the fascist regimes of faithful U.S. client states, including Pinochet's Chile and Suharto's Indonesia. He directed snide remarks toward those who did. He regularly attacked those in the West who dissented from anti-communist orthodoxy and who opposed U.S. interventionism abroad. As with many other Eastern European intellectuals, Sakharov's advocacy of dissent did not extend to opinions that deviated to the left of his own. The tolerance for Western imperialism extended to the upper reaches of the Soviet government itself, as reflected in a remark made in 1989 by a high-ranking official in the Soviet Foreign Ministry, Andrei Kozyrev, who stated that third world countries suffer not so much from capitalism as from a lack of it. Either by design or stupidity, he confused capital, which those nations lack, with capitalism, of which they have more than enough to victimize. He also claimed that none of the main bourgeois groups in America are connected with militarism. To think them as imperialists who plunder third world countries is a stereotyped idea that should be discarded. As a system of analysis mainly concerned with existing capitalism, Marxism has relatively little to say about the development of socialist societies. In the communist countries, Marxism has doled out like a catechism. Its critique of capitalism has no vibrancy or meaning for those who lived in a non-capitalist society. Instead, most intellectuals found excitement in the forbidden fruit of Western bourgeois ideology. In looking to the West, they were not interested in broadening the ideological spectrum, a desirable goal, but in replacing the dominant view with a rightist anti-communist orthodoxy. They were not for an end to ideology, but for replacing one ideology with another. Without hesitation, they added their voices to the chorus singing the glories of the free market paradise. Heavily subsidized by the Western sources, the right-wing intelligentsia produced publications like Moscow News and Argumenty Fakti, which put out a virulently pro-capitalist, pro-imperialist message. One such publication, Liberalnaya Gazeta, hailed Reagan and Bush as statesmen and architects of peace. It questioned the need for a Ministry of Culture in the USSR, even one that was now headed by an anti-communist. There is no such ministry in the United States, and yet it seems there is nothing wrong with American culture. Who said Russians don't have a sense of humor? With the decline of communist power in Eastern Europe, the worst political scum began to float to the surface. Nazi sympathizers and hate groups of all sorts, though they were not the only purveyors of bigotry. In 1990, none other than Polish Solidarity leader Lech Walesa declared that a gang of Jews had gotten hold of the trough and is bent on destroying us. Later on, he maintained that the comment did not apply to all Jews, but only those who were looking out for themselves while giving not a damn about anyone else. The following year, in Poland's post communist presidential election, various candidates, including Melissa, outdid each other in their anti Semitic illusions. In 1996, at a national ceremony, Solidarity chief Zygmunt Wurzak resorted to anti Semitic vituperation. I have no idea. While railing against the previous communist regime. Romanticizing capitalism. In 1990, in Washington, D.C., the Hungarian ambassador held a press conference to announce that his country was discarding its socialist system because it did not work. When I asked why it did not work, he said, "I don't know." There was someone who confessed that he had no understanding of the deficiencies of his country's socioeconomic process, even though he was one of those in charge of that process. Leaders who talk only to each other are soon out of touch with reality. The policymakers of these communist states showed a surprisingly un-Marxist understanding of the problems they faced. There were denunciations and admonitions aplenty, but little systemic analysis of why and how things have come to such an impasse. Instead, there was much admiration for what was taken to be Western capitalist know-how and remarkably little understanding of the uglier side of capitalism and how it impacted upon the world. In the USSR, Glasnost, the use of critical debate to invite innovation and reform, opened Soviet media to Western penetration and accelerated the very disaffection it intended to rectify. Leaders in Poland and Hungary, and eventually the Soviet Union and the other European communist nations, decided to open their economies to Western investment during the late 1980s. It was anticipated that state ownership would exist on equal terms with cooperatives, foreign investors, and domestic private entrepreneurs. In fact, the whole state economy was put at risk and eventually undermined. Communist leaders had even less understanding of the capitalist system than of their own. Most people living under socialism have little understanding of capitalism in practice. Workers interviewed in Poland believe that if their factory were to be closed down in the transition to the free market, the state will find us some other work. They thought they would have it both ways. In the Soviet Union, many who argued for privatization also expected the government to continue providing them with collective benefits and subsidies. One skeptical farmer got it right. Some people want to be capitalists for themselves, but expect socialism to keep serving them. Reality sometimes hits home. In 1990, during a glasnost period, when the Soviet government announced that the price of newsprint would be raised 300% to make it commensurate with its actual cost, the new pro-capitalist publications complained bitterly. They were angry that state socialism would no longer subsidize their denunciations of state socialism. They were being subjected to the same free market realities they so enthusiastically advocated for everyone else, and they did not like it. Not everyone romanticized capitalism. Many of the Soviet and Eastern European immigrants who had migrated to the United States during the 1970s and 1980s complained about this country's poor social services, crime, harsh work conditions, lack of communitarian spirit, vulgar electoral campaigns, inferior educational standards, and the astonishing ignorance that Americans had about history. They discovered they could no longer leave their jobs during the day to go shopping, and that their employers provided no company doctor when they fell ill on the job. that they were subject to severe reprimands when tardy, that they could not walk the streets and park late at night without fear, that they might not be able to afford medical services for their family or college tuition for their children, and that they had no guarantee of a job and might experience unemployment at any time. Among those who never emigrated were some who did not harbor illusions about capitalism. In fact, numerous workers, peasants, and the elderly were fearful of the changes ahead and not entirely sold on free market mythology. A 1989 survey of Czechoslovakia found that 47% wanted their economy to remain state controlled, while 43% wanted a mixed economy, and only 3% said that they favored capitalism. In May 1991, a survey of Russians by a U.S. polling organization found that 54% chose some form of socialism and only 20% wanted a free market economy, such as in the United States or Germany. Another 27% elected for a modified form of capitalism as found in Sweden. Still, substantial numbers, especially among intellectuals and youths, the two groups who know everything, opted for free market paradise without the faintest notion of its social costs. Against the inflated imagination, reality is a poor thing. Against the glaring image of the West cornucopia, the routinized, scarcity-ridden, and often exacerbating experiences of communist society did not have a chance. It seems communism created a dialectical dynamic that undermined itself. It took semi-feudal, devastated, underdeveloped countries and successfully industrialized them, bringing a better life for most. But this very process of modernization and uplift also created expectations that could not be fulfilled. Many expected to keep all the securities of socialism, overlaid with capitalist consumerism. As we shall see in subsequent chapters, they were in for some painful surprises. One reason siege socialism could not make the transition to consumer socialism is that the state of siege was never lifted. As noted in the previous chapter, the very real infernal deficiencies within communist systems were exacerbated by unrelenting external attacks and threats from the Western powers. Born into a powerfully hostile capitalist world, communist nations suffered through wars, invasions, and an arms race that exhausted their productive capacities and retarded their development. The decision by Soviet leaders to achieve military parity with the United States while working from a much smaller industrial base placed a serious strain on the entire Soviet economy. The very siege socialism that allowed the USSR to survive made it difficult for it to thrive. Perestroika, the restructuring of socialist economist practices in order to improve performance, was intended to open and revitalize production. Instead, it led to the unraveling of the entire state socialist fabric. Thus, the pluralistic media that were to replace the communist monopoly media eventually developed into a pro-capitalist ideological monopoly. The same thing happened to other socialist institutions. The intent was to use a shot of capitalism to bolster socialism. The reality was that socialism was used to subsidize and build an unforgiving capitalism. Pressed hard throughout its history by global capitalism's powerful financial, economic, and military forces, state socialism endured a perpetually tenuous existence, only to be swept away when the floodgates were opened to the West. And that's the end of chapter 4. So, that was chapter 4. It did talk about how there is stagnation in communist states to be productive and efficient and innovative. And that is something that needs to be um, rectified in common or orthodox Marxist ideology. People always have a need or a will to get more, do more, um, get something better, get become more luxurious, and there still needs to be that drive in communist societies, I believe. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to start uh, Valheim. Last time I uh, tried to sail on my raft all the way to an upper island, and immediately from unboarding I got wrecked by a bunch of, what are they called, graylings. They just came out of nowhere, and I wasn't quick enough to get back on the boat and sail away. But we were left with nothing, and I don't know what to do. I don't have anything. I don't even have clothes. So all of that stuff was in my little tomb when I died. That's all the way up there. So we're gonna have to figure that out. Maybe um, it's going to restart everything. Um, Probably for the first couple of hours. Maybe this whole stream is me trying to recover from that. But I do have the goal to get the boat back and get all my stuff back, and maybe recover all that before I get home. So, gonna take a break, and I'll see y'all in a little bit. Testing, testing. For the people who are here, thank you for watching. Please make sure to follow and subscribe to my other social media. I am VWAT with 4 A's, VWAAAAT, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, where I upload my pods. And I'm hoping to get some subscribers soon. My current aim is 50. So like, subscribe, share anything. If you find anything funny in the VOD, clip it for me and I'll post it somewhere. And yeah. So if we want, we can get Val. All right. So like I said earlier, last stream, I went exploring and I died and lost my raft and all of my things in probably what was a 2-day raft adventure. So I have nothing. So I'm going to load in on my little lake house, boat house. But I have nothing. Actually, let me change. I can see that. I'm glad that I hunted so many deer. Holy. Okay. Well, at least that gives me some clothes to wear. So, oh, 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 oh. Time to punch some trees. Now, am I going to get enough? Hey, good, good job, me. Time to punch some trees. Oh yeah, I need a bunch of flint. Gather all the flint. And rocks. Ooh, what did I leave in here? Oh, I didn't leave any. I only have 6 pieces of wood. Aren't you beach? Okay. I would like more feathers, but I don't. Oh yeah. So you have to go here. Need leather scraps. Now let's find some piggies and make fine leather scraps. Come here, piggy. Guess I'll go back to the home. Alright, well, let's make some stuff. First and foremost, building another. Doing our flint. All right. Hello. 333-9409. How are you? Guess I don't have any neck tails. So that's where we died, all the way up there. And we're going to try and find our way up there today. It might take a couple of days in game time. Try not to run into the rocks. I can turn off the... Because I like the Valheim music. Oh, wait. Let me turn... Alright. I meant to land up here. But we just cut. And that was a problem. Okay. What the heck? That was pretty funny. Should we get to the cabin first? Have a little overnight. That way it's not such a treacherous journey. I think we should do that. Okay. Just landed my boat, I guess. Oh, is that my cabin right there? Oh, the fire spot. We'll send the raft a little further along and then overnight at the cabin. All right. I dream of a mighty bear sleeping down below the earth in the winter of the world. It turns to its sleep. Something, something. That is a fun new addition, though. It's all these fish, but we never really got into the sea very much in my first edition. Look at all them fishies. nothing there. That's weird. Let's swing by and see what it is. There's something. There's a troll. Is it a whole troll camp or something? Yeah, I'm avoiding that. Oh, ran through a rock. Okay. Now let's sail. Don't know why I'm losing frames. Oh, oh, turning into. Let's not do that. Is it a spawner? Is that what those are? I have no idea of the actual like fighting part of this game. Like I'm all about the building and cooking, exploring. What's being my close? I'm too curious. Like, is it a spawner? Oh, it is a spawner. All right, let's go. Are you gonna follow me? Guess he is. Guess he has infinite energy. Follow me. Guess he thinks he'll eventually catch up. Or the AI think will eventually catch up. Okay, I need to turn around. Because this is a little inlet. Looks like I'm heading directly for it. There must have been a spawner that was right there to have made that many, because it was like 4 or 5. Yeah, I see a purple spawner. It's right there. I walked right into it. I wonder if I can shoot it. Once I get my bow, if I can shoot it. There's my boat. I'm glad I came here at night, even though it's about to set. You do it, Blowfish. You're just right below. Come on, jump on me. Another spawner right there. Gonna try and blow us into the coast. Once we get around this peninsula area, we'll sleep at the cabin again and then probably walk back. And see what we can get. Nice and easy. Oh no. Gonna run us into that beach. Is that a? Oh, that's not a spawner, is it? Nice and easy. Nice and easy. All right. Seemed a lot easier than I thought to do all this. We're gonna have to make this a home. So I'm going to try and level out I'm gonna make it like a little longhouse. Alright. And we know there's a bunch of pigs on this part. I want to let me pick up the pig. Oh no. Okay. Nah. Another one. No. No. We're Blackshirts. Oh shit. Must be speed. The deer one. We already did. You don't need. Oh my god. Ah! No, get away from me. Away from me. think I could get him. Ooh, I got him. Coming. Oh, Lordy, coming. Come on. Killed him. Ha ha. Oh. Yeah. Get away. Okay. What do I need to get rid of? Woo. All right. We killed our first troll. And that's pretty amazing. So which one am I going to make? I'm gonna make pants. Okay, that's pretty. Let's sleep on this. Probably head back to the other camp, the raft camp. Oh boy. That was fun. Do not know why it keeps going in and out. All right. Why is it freezing? This could be it for me, gaming wise, but I had fun. Things were easy. Actually, let me get to a better shot. So, this is a mountain. I am freezing. I need to get out of this pool. Wherever it is. Okay. Let me get to the beach, the lakeside. What's this one? Is this really nothing? Anyway. Head west. Okay, keep going the wrong way. Okay, this game is lagging pretty hard. So it's probably a good thing I'm about to wrap it up. All right, we're back home. Upgrade my bow. Upgrade. I need 3 and then 4. All right. Well, that wrap it up, guys. It's been fun. Remember to subscribe, follow, on my channels and on my Twitch. I will see y'all later.